Whom the Gods Fear, by Wdowski. Chapter 33. Demi's runabout had touched back down in the courtyard of the regional overseers. The second runabout was also making its approach and touched down a few minutes afterwards. Demi and the two crewmen armed with the antimatter rifles waited quietly for the second craft. Once it did land, Demi and his men approached it. The gull-winged hatch doors raised open, and 3 more of Demi's crewmen emerged from the craft. All 3 were still in their space suits, but without their helmets. 2 of the men were armed with the other 2 antimatter rifles. So all went well. Demi asked, "Aye, Captain. Their ship will not be returning to Earth any time soon. We shot up their bridge enough. I am sure we must have hit their spooky comm," one of the gunmen replied. "I still think we should have tried to board them to be sure in taking it out." The second gunman, crewman Kevin Jones, replied as he walked around the runabout to Demi. "We don't even know if we hit them in time. They could have sent a message back to Earth already." The Thars around them were prostrating themselves again. Thos-shomaa walked out of the hall to greet Demi. She seemed to enjoy all the Thars prostrated before her as she strolled past them. "Are they dead?" she softly asked, wrapping herself around Demi. He looked down at her. "I didn't kill any of them. I merely took out their shuttles. They are marooned on Yeager. They will not be telling anyone where we are." "Dorwa, do you think that is wise? To let others, who may also be seen as gods on our world?" She cooed into his ear. "She has a point, Captain." Jones responded, starting to remove his spacesuit. "Dorwa, you need to go back and finish them." She gently kissed his ear. Glen looked at the pulse rifle burns on the side of his runabout. He jerked his head away from her kisses and looked at her as he pointed to the damage on his craft. "Do you see that? These are stellar marines with pulse rifles. They are not Thars with pointy sticks. If we go back, we won't be able to surprise them again, and they do have the means to take us out of the sky. Dorwa, you are a god. You have no one to fear." She calmly answered, not disturbed at all with Demi having raised his voice at her. "I'll go back to finish them off," Jones said as he threw his peeled-off space suit into the back of his runabout. The other men agreed with Jones, willing to go back to finish the job. Demi turned to his men. "This is Glen Yeager you are facing. We are lucky that we got away with what we did. You are not going to catch him off guard again. The fact is, Captain Demi, you should have killed him when you had the chance. He is not going to just settle there and become a bleeding Yeager farmer," Jones said with a Cockney London accent. "I agree with Jones. We need to take him out now. We have the antimatter rifles. Whatever defenses they can hurriedly construct, we can blast straight through with these babies." The first gunman from a second shuttle, crewman Matt Manson, stated, patting the side of his rifle. "Your men understand, Dorwa. You need to eliminate the threat completely," she said soothingly as she caressed his face with one of her 6-fingered hands. He looked down at her. The beauty of her eyes captivated him, as they always seemed to do. He took a deep breath. "We will go back." He turned to his men, this time with both runabouts. He looked back down into her eyes. "But first I am bringing you back to the palace. I am not leaving you in this Netzi-infested place. You are so thoughtful, my Dorwa." She kissed him on his mouth. Her tongue parted his lips to enter and caress his tongue, as her kiss drew him into her. His men smiled as they climbed back into the runabouts. Lost in their passionate embrace, Demi and Thos-shomaa disappeared in the cloud of dust stirred up by the roaring runabouts lifting off. The evening sun was beginning to set in the west, and the gas giant had already risen in the east when Aroth in his cart returned to the homestead. By that time, Glen had heard back from Rubel that they had sent robots into the bridge and out on the hull. The repair bot gangs were already at work in patching up the breaches to the polo. The nanotech self-healing armor was functioning as it should, speeding up the repairs greatly. An advancement Demi was unaware the polo had. The bad news was that even at the accelerated rate, the damage to the hull was so immense that it was going to take at least a day before they could repressurize the bridge and get a full assessment of needed repairs. One thing was clear, confirming what Rebecca had told him earlier, and his greatest fear, the spooky comm on the bridge, did take a direct hit. There was no possible way of replacing the twin atom that was connected to the other twin back on Earth. They would not be able to get a message back to Earth in real time. With conventional fast as light radio signals, it would take over 55 years to get a message to Earth. Their only other option would be to send a radio transmission to the First Fleet in the Xing system to relay their message back to Earth with their spooky comms. The problem with that option was that it would still take at least 10 years for the First Fleet to receive their transmission. That is, if the First Fleet or any Earth vessels would even be in the Xing system at that time to even receive it. Glen sat at Arotha's kitchen table with Aroth, his 2 children, and Ann. Arotha's wives had served them dinner. It was the first thing Glen had eaten all day. They placed out plates of smoked meats, steamed vegetables with a salted butter made from the milk of one of their domesticated alien dairy animals, and bread made from the Xingese grain flour. To drink, there was a ceramic pitcher of a lightly tart alcoholic juice from one of their fruit trees, seasoned with the nectar of a flower from a different plant species. All were extremely good, but the most delicious dish the attractive wives served them were dumplings, also made from the Xingese grain flour. They were raised dumplings stuffed with juicy poultry. Aroth showed Glen and Ann how to dip their dumplings in a marvelously spicy sauce that teased their taste buds with hot, sweet, and sour flavors. The eating utensils they used were flexible steel tongs tipped with silver. The food was all cut into bite-sized pieces, so knives were not needed at the table. These are tipped in silver. I thought your father was poor. Glen asked Flowara. He is. It is a common element that can be found in the Great Barrens. The young girl explained as she used her tongs to pick up and dip an Aerschwa dumpling. She bit into it. My mothers are good cooks, yes? Yes, very good. And responded, taking already her 3rd dumpling. Glen used his tongs to take bite-sized pieces of the smoked meats and nodded in agreement with Ann. Best food I have had since the time J.D. had treated me to dinner on the Venture. Flowara translated for her father, who smiled that his guests enjoyed the food. He then said something to Flowara in Aerschwa while pointing to 2 of his wives. Flowara looked to Glen. My father would be honored if you let one of my 2 mothers, or both if you wish, comfort you tonight. Shiona is still of breeding age, but Imasai and Losaa are no longer. And was shocked how matter-of-fact the young girl was expressing her father's wishes to let 2 of his wives have sexual relations with Glen. Mr. Yeager will not need any comforting tonight from either of your mothers. And politely, but firmly informed girl. I won't. Glen asked, looking at Dr. Hogan. No, you won't, she answered him. Your comforting has already been arranged for this evening. It has? The corners of his mouth tried to hold back a smile. It has, and responded with a small smile in return. Thank your father for his gracious offer, but I seem to have other arrangements. Are you sure, Dorwa? There are things you can do with 2 or 3, you cannot with only 1. The girl responded, a bit confused by Glen's response. 2 or 3. Glen playfully said out loud, looking at the attractive women. Knowing what he was implying, Anne's face turned sour, making it clear to him she was not amused. First giving Dr. Hogan an innocent smile, he turned his attention back to the girl. I am sure that is true, Flowara, but I must respectfully decline your father's very kind offer. He looked to Dr. Hogan, who seemed pleased with his response to the small girl. Please explain to your father I mean no disrespect to him or his very lovely wives. It is clear my comfort will be well taken care of. He leaned into the girl and whispered, Dr. Hogan doesn't like to share me. Flowara explained to her father, who seemed perplexed but was not offended by Glen's rejection of his offer. He seemed to understand that the human's culture may be different than his own. Her father said one word to Glen, Wah. Why? Flowara translated. Why what? Asked Glen. The girl, understanding her father's curiosity, asked Glen directly without clarifying with her father. Why only 1 wife? Perhaps Dr. Hogan can better explain that to you. He looked to Ann. Equality. She responded. Equality. What does that have to do with only 1 wife? My mothers are all treated equally by my father. He loves none of them more or less than the others. Their chores are equally shared. In humanity's past, many of our cultures did allow many wives. In some isolated cultures, it is still practiced. But for the majority of Earth women, we do not want to share our husbands with other women. And explained. That is very selfish. The girl responded. Yes, it is, isn't it? If you think about it, it is. Glen added, smiling at Dr. Hogan, who seemed set back by the girl's reply. Would it be okay for a woman to have more than one husband? And asked the girl. Of course not. She replied, how would one know who the father of her baby is if she had more than one husband? That is a good point. Glen teased Ann. She gave Glen an angry glance. Keep it up, Mr. Yeager, and you will lose those comforting arrangements tonight. Glen erased his devilish smile as she responded to the girl. We feel it is more equal for women that a man is devoted only to her, that he does not divide his love among women. I think I understand your meaning. Flowara answered, and smiled that she could explain it to the young alien girl. Do women on your world have only one child? Flowara asked. Some do. Some could have up to 12. Most have only 2. And answered. Why? Is that not equal for the children? What do you mean? That is, if she has more than one child. The children have only one mother to love, yet the mother must divide her love for them. I see her point. Glen injected. If a mother can equally love more than one child, why is it not possible for a man to equally love more than one woman? Glen played devil's advocate, enjoying Ann's uncomfortable philosophical debate with the young girl. Yes. Flowara answered Glen. Is the difference between love and in love? And responded, a bit upset that Glen supported Flowara's arguments. In love, love? I have not learned the difference of these meanings. Flowara answered. Love is that between a parent and child, between siblings, and between very good friends that you may feel close enough to as a brother or sister. In love is romantic love. It can only be for one person at one time. Your thoughts, your desires, your needs and wants are solely for that one person. And explained to Flowara. It sounds like a wonderful feeling in love. The girl responded. It is. And answered, looking at Glen. Doctor and Hogan, you're a romantic. Glen smiled widely at her. Yes, I am. And smiled back proudly. I like romantics. He informed Ann. Is that why Demi has taken only one wife? Is he a romantic too? The young girl asked. The Demi I knew back on Earth was not known for being a one-woman-at-a-time man. Glen responded, which made it even more complexing to him how much Thos-shomaa seemed to have such a hold on the playboy Captain Demi. Are the women of your world known for controlling men? I do not understand. Flowara answered Glen. Is the real power held by the women? He asked in a different way, hoping the girl would understand his meaning. Women hold power. Flowara laughed. Women listen to their husbands, daughters their fathers. You have never had a woman leader? And asked. Women make up 90% of your population. No, we have only had men as district possessors, regional overseers, and great lords. Thos-shomaa men and women would never follow a woman. Why not? And was offended from what she heard from the girl. One needs only one male to produce many young. Women can only produce one young at a time for very few years. Men are rare and valuable in society. Only males can become amphithars. Amphithars forsake women to be great warriors. It would be strange for them to follow one. So, the Thos-shomaa would never accept Demi's wife as their ruler. Glen tried to confirm his theory. Of course not. That's silly. She answered Glen. What are you getting at? And asked Glen. I do not think Demi is the one in power. I think his wife Thos-shomaa is using him to rule. It seems the Thos-shomaa males are in such high demand that they would never let themselves be controlled by a single woman. This society would never accept a female leader. Their warriors are their political power, and their warriors live a celibate life to enhance their ferocity in combat. Much like how fighters and American football players in the past were told to abstain from sex the night before a big fight or a game. You think she is using Demi as a puppet? You have seen the reaction of our men to these women. Demi is a legendary womanizer that I think has finally met his match. Glen looked sincerely into Ann's eyes. To be completely honest, if it were not for how I feel about you, I could see myself also easily succumbed by their sensuality and beauty. Really? And softly asked as her eyes began to water slightly. Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Yeager. We have 2 bogies coming in from the north. It seems to be both runabouts. Captain Mahan approached them. How far out are they? Glen stood up from the table and turned to Mahan. Only 6 minutes. One of the satellites just picked them up taking off from the northern city. I was just about to order the Marines to the south to redeploy to reinforce the north. No, don't, those runabouts can circle around us very quickly. Captain Demi knows we will be waiting for them. He will circle us before making his strike. Keep your men where they are. My hope is he won't think we would be deployed so far out from the farmhouse. We need to light this place up. Let him think we have centered our defense here. Give your Marines the element of surprise when he comes in closer to make his strike. Aye, Mr. Yeager. Glen turned to Flora. Does this building have a basement, a cellar, an underground floor? Yes, in the kitchen there is a hatch to the storage cellar. Move your family to there. He told the girl now, Flora. He said in earnest to get the girl moving. And you and the science team join them. You should join them too, Mr. Yeager. Mahan suggested. No, I need to help you make this place look like we are all in here. Light it up like a Christmas tree. Glen then turned to Dr. Hogan, who was still sitting at the table, and move now. Get the others below. And got up and shouted to the science team to fetch those working on the shuttles outside to join Flora's family in the storage cellar. Glen, Mahan, Sergeant Major Bryce, and the two specialists began turning on every scientific piece of equipment in the building and lighting every candle in every room they could find. Glen threw additional logs onto the hearth's fire, enlarging its heat signature. Mahan and his men all put on their tactical helmets and monitored the approach of the runabouts from the intelligence the GPS satellites were transmitting. They are 2 minutes in range of our forward positions. Mahan shouted out from an upstairs room to Glen, who was fanning the fire. They have just split up, circling around us as you suspected, one heading to the west, the other east. Tell the forward positions to not open fire until they a clear shot at their sides. Glen shouted back to him. The inner positions and their neighboring points should open up fire also at that time. We need to hit them hard and fast. I want you and your men on the second floor to start firing at them. At 2,000 yards, we need to keep their focus on the farmhouse. Remind them they need to hit the sides of the runabouts. Their pulse plasma rifles will not have an effect on their nose and belly heat shielding. Aye, Mr. Yeager. Mahan relayed Glen's orders through his tactical helmet to all his Marines, while he and the other 3 men took up firing positions. The runabouts sweeping around the homestead could see the farmhouse hot with activity on their infrared sensors. 3,000 yards out they banked in towards a farmhouse from the west and east, making their attack run. At 2,000 yards, they began to receive indirect fire from the upper story of the building. The crafts bounced and rattled as they dodged the pulse gun fire. A few shots grazed ineffectively against their nose and belly heat shielding. At 400 yards, the outer positions to the east and west opened fire on both runabouts, supported by the inner positions on both their flanks. The multiple direct hits from the concealed Marines below punched through the flight armor and soon through the hulls of the runabout. The richer oxygen content of Thos-shomaa intensified the onboard fires. Both crafts spun out of control, trailing intense flames and black smoke. They plowed into the fields of Xingni's wheat. The Marines climbed out of their concealed positions and rushed the runabouts. Fighting the fires, they pulled out the bodies of their occupants. We have one still alive, badly burnt, reported the east point into Mahan's tactical helmet. All 3 dead, reported the Marines at the other downed runabout. Mahan descended the stairs to report to Glen. Demi, was Glen's first question. Mahan checked with his Marines on the status of Demi. They reported back that other bodies were too badly burnt to know. Mahan ordered the Marines to pull in and set up 4 sentries 50 yards out from the farmhouse at all major compass points. The remaining Marines were to return to the farmhouse with the bodies to be identified and the one wounded attacker, Crewman Jones. Flora's family emerged from the cellar with Dr. Hogan and the other science team members. Dr. Hogan rushed to assist the Marine medics attending to Crewman Jones, who was critically wounded and unconscious. 2 other Marines, with their pulse rifles slung over their shoulders, carried in the 4 recovered antimatter rifles. Mahan ordered them to set them down on the dining room table. Glen and Mahan approached the table to examine the condition of the weapons. In the background, they could hear Dr. Hogan shouting clear as she used a field defibrillator on Jones.